talk about talking trains a lot on his channel. Mostly Thomas trains, and also some non-talking trains like in Star Wars. But there is another franchise that I have always wanted to dive into here, and that is Transformers. I love the Transformers franchise. I admit I'm rather late. I first got into it after seeing Transformers 1 in theaters out of curiosity, and I've been hooked ever since. After that, I got into watching all of G1 cartoon, Transformers Prime, and I even caught up with the current Skybound comic run. I love Transformers. And as you can imagine, models of these characters will be made, eventually. As of right now, I have made 5 Autobots: Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, Blur, and Centurion. I don't really have an AU story for these models, more so just designs because I feel like they look cool. Hence why they're not exact to any official design, but I do plan on making many more though. These are really fun to make. But for now, let's just dive into how I made these 5 models of the Autobots. And we'll start with Blur. Blur is one of my favorites of the franchise. In a way, he's kind of like the Porter of Transformers. Kind of underused, but also very unique in a way too. But he also just stay on the side during most of the story. He's also just so funny. Blur was a model that I finished the most recently out of these Autobots, and searching for an alt mode for him was rather difficult. I did not want to use just a regular model of a car for him, or something that's like too similar to Bumblebee and Cliffjumper. I also wanted a design that conveyed speed without being some super fancy high-end car. That was when I came across the 1968 Alfa Romeo 33.2. This is an old school race car, and man, this is a beauty of a car. I just love how it looks, and there are plenty of HO scale models of it on the market. I found a solid red one for a good price, and went forward with it. Painting was the easiest process of any model I've ever had. I was actually able to take this car apart pretty easily, and I was able to paint the shell without having to be mindful of the window pieces, which made it so much easier. I first used a light blue paint pen for the base color, instead of just going with a primer. And this worked way better than I thought, maybe because the paint pen is oil based, as the coating was very smooth and even, and it was also the exact light blue I wanted, so that worked out pretty well too. I then used Barrel's Cobalt Hue for the secondary color. For the dark blue, I just used a toothpick for it, as the surface area is very small and the brush it wouldn't let the paint stick at all. But I just kept globbing it on very carefully and trying to smooth it out, and I managed to get it there. Only a few touch-ups here and there were needed, and then I brushed on a matte finish made by Mod Podge. After a quick reassembly and application of the Autobahn insignias on the hood, Blur was done. Fun fact, the insignias were actually very late additions, as I recently got a sticker decal sheet with the 2 factions on them, and so I added them all to my previous models. Now we move on to Cliffjumper. Cliffjumper is known for being the one who dies early on in most timelines and shows and other projects. But in the Skybound comic run, he actually lives on, and they do so much with him, and I honestly love it. In most iterations, Cliffjumper is basically Bumblebee's clone when it comes to design. In G1 and Skybound to an extent, and I think the Bumblebee movie too, where they just make him a red Bumblebee. I don't mind this too much, but they are not related as far as I'm aware, and I wanted something a little bit different looking from Bumblebee. Hence why I went with the 1994 Porsche 911 Carrera 2. This is a pretty nice car, and it has a unique outline, and I bought a purple model of it, and then painted it solid red. It was honestly quite easy, although I couldn't get it apart for painting, which made it slightly more difficult. Then again, Cliffjumper has always had a very simple design, just solid red, so that was basically it. After applying the Autobahn insignias, Cliffjumper was done. And now, onto Centurion. You are probably wondering, who the hell is Centurion? Well, this character originates from the Hearts of Steel comic run published by IDW. Hearts of Steel was originally a standalone story where the Transformers landed on Earth during the Industrial Revolution in the United States. I have yet to read any of the IDW comics for Transformers, but I've heard it was really good. In the Transformers IDW run, it was revealed that the Hearts of Steel Elseworlds, I guess, story was actually a part of the main timeline the entire time, as they revealed that Optimus, Bumblebee, etc. were merely similar-looking Maximals from some Cybertronian colony planet that Shockwave purposely wiped the memories of and had crashed on Earth as a messed-up test run for Cybertronians landed on Earth. So Hearts of Steel Bumblebee was really a Maximal named Centurion all along. After that storyline concluded, Centurion roamed around a lot, changing alt modes frequently, and working with various groups. And then eventually had his consciousness fused with the superhero Atomic Man, creating a whole new mental being, I guess. Yeah, Centurion is mentally fucked. But eventually, he ended up joining the Autobots, and was involved in the story from there, at least in some capacity. But that's all I know about this character. But this character always fascinated me when I first read about it. Mostly because he was a train at first, and actually lasted beyond just one single storyline, and did surprisingly decent amount of stuff. And so I decided to make a model of him, as I've never seen anyone else do it, so I figured it'd be fun. I searched endlessly for a model that somewhat resembled his look in the original comic. Centurion's tank engine alt mode isn't really based on anything in real life, especially with two funnels on the front, but he is an 040 saddle tank, so that was at least a start. My search eventually led me to this little switcher model, and got to work once it arrived. I took the whole model apart, and got to paint it. I decided to take the valve gear off to paint it, and also to resolve mechanical issues, although those issues came later. I then primed the body, and then applied Albero's King Gold to the cab and other parts. I then used a Dremel to remove the molded on Westinghouse pump on the side. The same thing happened with these little step things on the side as well. I just wanted to make the model look a little less standard looking. I then sanded off the areas smooth, and then painted them in black. I originally painted the pistons in all yellow, but I didn't really like how it looked, so I just repainted them black, and then painted these piston drum things silver to add a bit more color variety. And I also painted the running board sides red. Again, this isn't really a trait on any of the figures, but I feel this adds a little more color variety. It breaks up monotony in just having the yellow and black. Next was to paint the wheels yellow. A fairly easy process, but the latter half of this section was what drove me nuts. But we'll get back to that later. I initially wanted to stick with a single funnel, like for more realism, but eventually I decided to remove it as I wasn't really seeing Centurion while making this for a while, and decided to 3D print some new ones. I just whipped up a quick model in Tinkercad and printed a bunch, and then glued them into place. I then shifted back to the chassis. The model didn't run due to the wire connecting the pickups to the motor being severed for some reason, and so I had to take the motion apart and carefully solder that wire back in. This was very hard since the only soldering kit I have is a giant one meant for larger projects. So it felt like having to use one of those comically large pencils to do a little checkbox on like a sticky note. It was very tedious, and it ended up with this nasty soldering blob, which I could not get any smaller without the wire coming out again. So I decided to just keep it and just bend the side rods around it. But eventually I was able to get it to work. We have life, oh. And man, that was euphoric actually testing it, and it actually worked. I then put the valve gear back in. After that, I printed and painted a snowplow for Centurion. This is meant to be a representative of his chunky cowcatcher he has in the comics and the Hearts of Steel Bumblebee figure. I then decided to dry brush the model with silver to give it some more weathering and to hide the imperfections. I also feel this gives it a worn down look. After a clear coat and then the Autobahn insignias on the sides, Centurion was finally done. Somehow he was the most difficult out of all my Autobots, at least so far. But I love him regardless. Alright, my favorite Transformers glove shell. And now we segue into how I made Bumblebee. Bumblebee was made using an HO scale model of the new Beetle RSI. This is basically a regular modern Volkswagen Beetle, but with a spoiler and higher performance stats. And it looks pretty cool. I find this a good middle ground between the classic Beetle of G1 and the Camaro alt mold of the movies. I found a model on eBay and then got to work. Using toothpicks, I painted the whole model in yellow. This was very tedious as the paint would not stay when using a brush, and using toothpicks and just globbing it on bit by bit was the only way I can get it to stay. This took multiple coats everywhere. It was pretty tedious. But eventually, I was able to get it even. I then went in with black to paint the hoods and smaller details. I then repainted the lights and then clear coated him. And later on, I added the Autobahn insignia on his hood. And that's basically it. Bumblebee was done after that. And now we transition to the big one. The one you've all been waiting for. The greatest leader in all of fiction. Optimus Prime. My model of Optimus Prime is pretty dead on to his Gen 1 design. You just can't go wrong with the Kenworth 100. I found a white K100 model on eBay, and once it arrived, I got to painting. I first primed the tractor in gray, and I began painting Optimus's body itself. Me personally, I've always liked my Optimus Prime designs with a bit extra red on them, and so I painted the trailer red, at least in the front part. The rest was painted in Apple Barrel's Timeless Gray. I think it turned out pretty well. I then painted a few bits on the main body in white, and made a few details in red as well. The truck frames were already blue out the gate, so I just left them alone. I then painted this little blue strip along the bottom of the trailer for some more color variety on it. After a clear coat, Optimus Prime was initially done. And for about a year or so, he just sat like this. But again, recently, I bought that decal sheet with insignias on it. And so I applied 2 to Optimus. Or 4 actually, as he's a trailer. And this really lifts the model. It just does, it looks so good. But after that, he was fully complete. With that, we have finally covered all of my HO scale models of the Transformers. And I 100% plan on making many more Autobots. Currently, I would like to start working on Arcee and Greenlight at some point. And also some Decepticons as well. In fact, I've already finished a Decepticon, although you'll see him very soon. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all same time next week. We are back with another Transformer showcase. This time, we are focusing on a Decepticon. Here is my HO scale custom model of Astrotrain. Astrotrain is one of the few triple changers of the Transformers franchise, able to transform into a steam locomotive and a giant spaceship. Astrotrain wasn't used a whole lot in most iterations of the franchise, at least from what I've seen, but he has remained quite popular, especially given what he does in the current ongoing comic run by Skybound and Image Comics. Astrotrain has shockingly never had an HO scale model made of him, at least officially, and if you don't count his G1 toy, which is HO scale but at 3 foot gauge for HO scale, which doesn't exist in Model Train Track. A few people have made custom models of him in HO scale, notably the Lazy Eyebrow, who made a G1 accurate shell based on his original basis, D51. My personal approach to modeling Transformers is more so to find a unique alt mode and design to them, and also give them a slightly non-standard paint job. And also, Astrotrain's alt mode has never been exactly concrete. He is a D51 in the G1 cartoon, a C62 in the Skybound comic, and he's also been a variety of Cybertronian and diesel locomotives across many iterations. My personal favorites are the D51 and C62. I think I lean towards the C62 better. However, Japanese steam locomotives in HO scale go for pretty pennies. Let's say that. Yeah. Now I could always print a body shell, but I know that was beyond my capabilities having to design one for my specific chassis. So I just skipped on Japanese engines. The guy turns to a spaceship. I think we have a little bit of leeway here. And so I decided to make him something somewhat similar to his Skybound run, but not exact. I happen to still have my old Caitlyn model from years ago in my old junk box. I decided to make use of that. as I plan on making a new Caitlyn model one day. So I got to work prepping the model for its new look. First thing I did was take the whole thing apart and submerge the body in isopropyl alcohol. Any percentage really works, but the stronger the better. After about 6 hours or so, I took the model out and scrubbed it with a plastic wire brush to remove the paint. Once all the paint was off and a quick wash and dry, I got to modding. Astrotrain almost always has smoke deflectors and boosters on his rear where his cab is. So I applied that here. For the boosters, I just used some cardstock to cover the cap opening and then coated the whole thing in a generous amount of super glue. I then carefully plopped each little cone piece for the boosters into place. This was very fiddly, but I managed to get it even in the end. I then searched for smoke deflectors to use. Now initially, I wanted to use the deflectors from my old City of Bristol model, which I turned to Duchess years ago, as I knew I still had the body shell in my junk box, at least somewhere. But then I remembered that I tossed the whole model while I was cleaning, and I no longer have it, so that was out of the cards. I turned to my Busy Bee James model, which has the N-Class smoke deflectors that are removable, and so I just took them off of B. James and put them on the Astrotrain. After modding, I primed the body in Rust-Oleum flat white primer. And after a day of drying, I sprayed the body in Krylon's Gloss Rich Plum. Now it is well known that Rust-Oleum and Krylon paints do not mix, but I figured since the primer was already fully dry, that'll be fine. And it was. This is what we call foreshadowing, people. I then consulted some friends regarding how to paint other details, as I didn't want Astrotrain to be just a whole monotonous purple color. After a while, I eventually settled on sticking to the G1 paint scheme for the most part, with some elements from other eras and the merch sprinkled in. So I painted the smoke box, smoke deflectors, and the domes all in black. I also painted the running board sides in red. And this is where it really started coming together nicely, with a nice color variety, especially with the little bits in white. Most notably, the roof. After painting a few smaller details here and there, I then color masked purple with my owl barrel acrylics, and then brush painted the pistons and other parts of the chassis in purple. I decided against painting the wheels purple, and instead painted the side rods red. Only just the inner grooves on them though. This is where I was getting really excited for the model's outcome. I was loving how it turned out. The last thing I was planning to do was add the insignias, but first came clear coating. I busted out my Rust-Oleum matte clear and sprayed as usual. And then about 12 seconds later, yeah, literal seconds after spraying the clear coats, part of the shell began bubbling and veining up very badly. This was painful to watch in real time. Weirdly, the bubbling was only present mostly on the back right side of it and a little bit on the left, but all towards the cab. This, people, is why you never mix Rust-Oleum and Krylon. Never do that. Not wanting to completely redo the whole model, I just scraped off the bubbled up sections of paint and then color matched as close as I could get to the Krylon color. And so I just brushed on heavy coats of the purple in needed areas, and then lightly brushed over on the other areas that were fine, mostly just to unify it and make it a little more consistent. It isn't the smoothest or most clean looking, but I prefer this over redoing the whole process over again. You can just hand wave by saying just a little wear and tear from fighting Autobots for so many years. But after that whole mishap being fixed, I sought out a clear coating alternative. I decided to try out Mod Podge Matte Finish. This is a water-based clear coat that brushes on. And I was also able to apply it to my other chassis parts as well, which sends this brush on. I honestly like the outcome of this matte finish more than Rust-Oleum's in my opinion, but I recommend diluting it a little bit, as you can see brush strokes depending if you're too gloppy with it. But I'm still happy with it regardless. After letting it dry for a day, I applied the Decepticon insignias on these smoke deflectors. I got this little sticker sheet from eBay. In my listing I used, I had a sheet for Decepticon and one for Autobot as well. Man, these insignias really bring them all together. After a finishing touches with the Smokebox store and a quick reassembly, Astrotrain was finally complete. He looks incredible next to my Autobots, especially next to Centurion on my little display. I am so happy with how it turned out. I would like to take this time to say thank you all for the support of my Autobot showcase. This is my first time branching out beyond Thomas since my Star Wars video last year, which that video didn't really do too well, but the Transformers one, y'all all really loved it, and it did really well too. And I love making it too, so you can definitely expect more Transformers videos in the future. I've since made a few more Autobots since the last showcase, and I've started on some Decepticons as well. And they'll all be getting showcases in the coming weeks. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all same time next week. Welcome back to Porterverse Workbench for another model showcase. This episode will see us return to the world of the Transformers. The Decepticons are the focus of this video. Up for showcasing are my custom models of Starscream, Soundwave, and Megatron. These models depict my ideal designs for the characters, but are also separate from all my Porterverse stuff. These are just for fun. We'll go through how I made each of these models one by one. Let's start with Starscream. Starscream was probably the hardest to find a base model for. He is a fighter jet, which are usually massive in real life. If you wonder why HO00 scale models of, say, a Boeing 747 doesn't exist, it's because it will be absolutely enormous and unbelievably expensive, even if it did exist. Starscream is usually an F-15, F-14, or some other iteration of some fighter jet, depending on the iteration of them. I personally see Starscream as a small and somewhat compact fighter jet. Something that Megatron sees as an insect that keeps bothering him all the time. I also wanted a base model that was relatively easy to find on the market, in case I ever decided to make Sunstorm. I eventually found this little toy jet on eBay. It looked like an F-14 and was decently sized for what I wanted, and so I moved forward with it. It is all plastic and held in by screws, so it was easy to take apart and sand down everything for painting, which I did once the model arrived. I primed the two halves with a brush-on gray acrylic, just a custom mixture of mine, and used paint pens for the initial base coats of the reds and blues. I like to do this on some models to achieve an even finish for bright colors. After that, I brushed on a light gray acrylic for most of the body, this being Barrel's Timeless Gray, and then used Barrel's Bright Red and Cobalt Hue for the reds and blues respectively. This was followed by Barrel's King's Gold for the visor, and my primer mixture for the accent colors of dark gray. All these were followed by a multitude of touch-ups with toothpicks. After painting, I brushed on a matte finish Mod Podge to seal everything in. And once that dried, I completed the last thing by adding the Decepticon insignias to his wings. And boom! We have a Starscream. Gotta love this crazy guy.
You can't keep me in here, Megatron!
Now onto the auto-tuned dad of the faction, Soundwave. Soundwave is a character where nearly anything goes when it comes to his alt mode. He's been a boombox, a car, a jet, thing, and even a freaking torpedo. Damn near anything works for Soundwave. I personally like something that's pretty boxy, but I also wanted to integrate some way of pulling all of his cassette tapes in his alt mode. I also wanted Soundwave to be a little bit smaller than my initial pick for Megatron, which you'll see later. I searched eBay endlessly for the right choice, and then finally came across this. The MRLS Tank Bully 2106, according to the eBay listing. I only hope there is a better name for this. To me, this was the perfect choice for Soundwave. It's got a boxy shape, somewhat medium sized compared to most tanks, and my favorite part, the missile launchers. Soundwave can just aim and launch the cassettes like missiles in his alt mode, and can travel damn near anywhere thanks to the tank treads. As you can imagine, I pounced on this after I found it. Once it arrived, I got to work by setting down the surfaces lightly to prepare for painting. I actually skipped primer and jumped straight into spraying on the main body color, this being Rust-Oleum's Ink Blue. After that dried, I began painting the details by hand. I painted the tank tread innards in black, and a different color for each missile dot. I actually used some reference for the missiles here and painted each one a different color. So every color here does match an existing cassette tape. All was going well until my silver paint pen decided to dump half of its ink out in an instant. Yeah, this is not fun. This sunk into every crevice. I wiped off what I could, but I had to end up color matching brush on acrylic the best I could, as I did not want to have to start over. After applying the Decepticon insignias, Soundwave was done. I am really happy with this model. I love his unique outline. I don't think I've really seen anyone depict Soundwave like this. It's pretty cool, I find. Now onto the leader of the Decepticons. One of the most ruthless Transformers to ever live. Megatron. Megatron was a character I just knew had to be done right. I wanted an alt mode for him that looked absolutely terrifying. I mean, have you seen what he did to Trailbreaker in the Skybound comics? After searching, I eventually landed on using a US Army M53 150mm SP howitzer tank. This tank just looks powerful, and is pretty large. Once it arrived, I disassembled the model and sprayed it with chrome spray paint. Now, I do apologize. I forgot to take a lot of progress pics with Megatron. I only have 4, I think. So a lot of them will be reused and go back and forth. I was just too excited to make him, and I fast-tracked his completion. Anyways, after the chrome paint dried, I painted the tank treads and various panels in black. I looked at a lot of different Megatron iterations to get an idea for his livery. I wanted something mostly G1 accurate, but with some other accent colors sprinkled in, not just monotonous gray/silver. So I stuck with just 3 colors for Megs: chrome, black, and purple. The purple was used very sparingly, only for this little running board piece that was on the sides. It gives a little pop of color. After painting, I sealed in the black and purple bits with matte finish Mod Podge, and intentionally left the chrome as it was. I just love the shine of it. It looks so good. I then applied the Decepticon insignias on his sides. And just like that, Megatron was done. With these 3 completed, I now have 4 Decepticon models in my collection. For those wondering, I would love to make more someday, although that might not be for a while. But I do have more Transformer models already made and are ready for showcase, and that will be out very soon. But that's for another time. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all same time next week. Welcome back for a new Transformers model showcase. We have a new wave of Autobots to show off: Greenlight, Arcee, and Ultra Magnus. We'll go through these 3 models one at a time and go over how I made them. Let's start with Greenlight. Greenlight was made as I wanted to include a model of a Transformer that was a little more in the niche side of things. She also has ties to other characters, notably Arcee, as they're a romantic couple, and so I decided to move forward with her. Greenlight is typically a race car similar to Indy 500 and Formula 1 cars. I eventually came across a little diecast on eBay. It was really cheap and was local to me, so it arrived pretty fast. The first thing I did once it arrived was lightly sand down the whole model, mostly to remove any printing and to get ready for painting. I then jumped straight into painting, skipping the primer. This was due to the size of the model, very tiny, and I didn't want to kick up the layers so much, so I just jumped straight into the green. I would like to apologize for the lack of progress photos. This model took me 1 day to make, and everything moved along very fast, so there was only a few photos. After brushing on all the coats of lime green, I then painted some details in white with toothpicks. Once the paint dried, I brushed on a matte finish Mod Podge to seal it all in. And once that dried, I applied her Autobot insignias on her sides. And just like that, Greenlight was done. Now onto her partner, Arcee. Arcee was a character I admittedly struggled to find a model for. She has had many different alt mode designs over the years. She's been cars, motorcycles, hover cars, the list goes on. She's also had a lot of different liveries as well. Pink, white and red, blue, and that's crazy. For alt mode, I knew a motorcycle was out of the question due to HO scale vehicle models, especially for cars being really tiny, and I wanted Arcee to be an actual car. I eventually landed for her livery to be G1 inspired. And for her alt mode, eventually became the 2014 Porsche 930 Turbo. The model was produced by Herpa for those wondering. To me, this had the right vibe for Arcee. Once the model arrived, I took the whole thing apart completely and painted the main body piece pink. I used a paint pen here, which is oil based. I honestly find this way easier in some cases, especially with undercoats, and it goes on really even as well. After applying an even coat of pink, I painted the doors and hood white. This was super hard to get right. I couldn't just use a white paint pen, as it was pink oil-based ink all over, and using a white paint pen would just smear it around and cause issues with the tip of the marker itself. And white acrylic paint is always hard to work with. And no matter what, I couldn't get it to lay smooth. And it's still kind of lumpy if you really zoom in on it, but I'm okay with it. The model itself is super tiny, and it's always seen from afar anyways. So I don't see it as a huge deal per se. Following some touch-ups, I gave Arcee's body a clear coat, the same Mod Podge as Greenlight. And then the final step, as always with these, are the Autobot insignia on her hood. Just the one in this case. After a reassemble of the model, Arcee was complete. Now I segue onto her mentor in the Skybound comics, or Energon universe, Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus is a character I wanted to do from the start. I also wanted to have a unique base for him. I didn't want him to just be a recolor of the Kenworth K100 like Optimus is, as... I always had an issue with this, as... this is going to sound very nitpicky, but Ultra Magnus always had his trailer permanently attached and needed to transform into his size. Yet Optimus never did. Which, like, by that logic, Optimus will need his trailer to transform, but he doesn't. I know this is Transformers we're talking about, but still, this always bothered me. And so I saw an option that would account for the trailer, back, and the cab perfectly. I didn't want to do like a regular truck like Transformers Prime did, as I like the white cab for Ultra Magnus. It's a nice pop of color. I landed on the Ford C-Series van with the body attached. This model has the van body on the back by default, and also has an option with the white cab. Perfect for Ultra Magnus. This way the cab can stay white, and you can also have the trailer or van body, I guess, on the back, giving him that more built appearance. And he also generally looks bigger than Optimus, not counting the trailer, of course. And this is what I went with. And once it arrived, I realized this would be way easier than I thought. This model took me a whopping 2 hours to finish. The truck van body comes off really easily, and all the panels come off as well. So this made painting the trim and the paneling itself very easy. The trim was painted in Apple Barrel's bright red, and I sprayed a light blue spray paint for the paneling. I did a very thin coat, as it's a light color on a white panel, so it didn't need a whole lot. It's not super even, but you can just hand wave and say it's just like wear and tear. And I intentionally left the cab alone, aside from the insignias on the sides. This was a huge time saver, as trying to mask off and work behind the van cab if it couldn't detach, that would have been a nightmare. And the paint dried very quickly in every case, so only after a couple hours I was able to reassemble. And just like that, Ultra Magnus was done. I am really happy with how it turned out. Easily one of my favorite Transformers models so far. With that, we have covered my Wave 2 models of the Autobots. For those wondering what will come next for Transformers videos, that's in the air. I'm running out of space for new models, especially Transformers models, and I don't want to end up cluttering my space with tiny trucks and cars and more trains and whatnot. But eventually, I'll have my own place and more space, but that won't be for a while, I guess. But do know this won't be the last time you see Transformers models, although it might be a while. But one day, I will make more. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all same time next week.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.